Hey guys, this is Zane here, back at it with another episode of watching Monster House every single day of the month with my friends because I want them to. Although, as Casper mentioned a couple episodes ago, it's not particularly watching with my friends every day, but I myself am watching it every day, so it counts. And today, I have my guest Anthony. If you want to do a little bit of an intro for yourself.
So, hey everyone, my name's Anthony. I am just kind of your average guy, and I'm really I really like music. I do a lot of my hobbies involve playing music, analyzing music, and just performing and studying what makes music sound cool.
Perfect. And so, specifically with this episode, you focused on the music for the movie, right?
Yeah, I took a look at the soundtrack, which was surprisingly hard to find on the internet.
Yeah,
I don't know why.
there was a Spotify entire soundtrack at one point, but I suppose not anymore.
It's still up, but everything is removed. It's crazy.
Yeah, so I don't know what the issue with that is. Maybe I don't think there's localization or regional issues with Spotify, but whatever. That's kind of weird.
Yeah.
So how'd you go about taking your notes for the music then?
So I found there was listings of all the soundtrack names. So I took all the major soundtracks and then I rewatched the movie and then I listened to the music and I made notes about how they fit into the scene and kind of interesting results.
Okay, wow, you went a lot more in depth than I expected you to. So I definitely really appreciate that. That's for sure.
That's
Um,
just me going through, just getting obsessive over
I
all
mean,
the little things.
it works and I like it. Did you do you think there's like a big difference from listening to the music while there's a scene playing or just listening to like just the soundtrack on its own? If you understand what I'm trying to get at.
No, I completely
Okay.
understand. And there definitely is because I was gonna say like especially when you're scoring for movies and stuff, like there's things happening on the screen. So a lot of the times in lots of soundtrack pieces, you'll want to have like little musical ideas that happen alongside what you're seeing, so it like reinforces, like if there's like a surprising moment or they discover something, you could have like a little lift or something, and that happens a lot in the movie while I was watching it, like when the police like uncover all the cold medicine in the dummy, there's like a little like dopey lift that happens.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, you did go in so the lift that you mentioned is like what's it called again? A dopey lift? Is that like a
Or
specific thing or is it just like
no,
a
just kind of describing the like kind of dopey police officers and like the kind of silliness of it all.
Gotcha. Okay. I might have a lot of questions in regards to that stuff cuz I mean, I've taken band
Oh,
classes and stuff, but as far as actually analyzing music, I know practically nothing about it. So, you're
well,
the expert here.
even still, like there's a lot of stuff you can do with analyzing music theory and like terms of like knowing what the chords and how each of the sounds work. But then there's just like the broad ideas, which I kind of focus on because I can't memorize chord names.
And I definitely wouldn't know any chord names, so we're good for that. So right off the bat, were there any specific songs that you really enjoyed compared to other ones? Like a few that really stood out to you?
Yeah, so there was a couple. Most of the songs are just named by what's happening on the screen, but there was a couple of them that I really liked how they played, either how they played or how they played with the scene. Uh, my most notable one from my favorite scene in the movie is at at the very end of the movie when Nebcracker is dancing with the the fading image of his wife. It's a very pretty waltz that I think really kind of it plays with like kind of the motif of like whenever they talk about the house or whenever they talk about the wife, there's this like little melody structure. It's kind of just like a classic just kind of like sad waltz thing, but I think it's really touching seeing it right after like the big explosion and the big like bombastic music that was happening, and then it comes back to like this really sad and tragic like fleeting romance between the husband and wife as she disappears, and as that melody structure and the waltz kind of disappears with her.
Yeah, I think that's, as far as if you're looking on YouTube and stuff, that's definitely one of the more notable songs in the entire soundtrack. I think it's that one and maybe one or two other ones, but that one definitely is memorable. That's for sure.
Yeah, especially because it's like a motif, so like this like melody structure is used a lot throughout the movie. It's kind of like a theme of
Okay.
like a character or an idea or something. So it's used a lot when they're like looking into like the history of the house, and like when he's talking about his wife. And I kind of just like the soft melody, and especially it's not necessarily like spooky like a lot of the other, or suspenseful like a lot of the other songs, but it is I think you really feel like the tragedy, and I think it really works well with the scene.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that.
Another song I think is kind of fun, just in the way that they use it in the soundtrack, is the very first song you probably hear after the titles, the one where the little girl.
Oh yeah, yeah, Eliza's theme. I think it might be called.
It's called Eliza's song.
Okay.
So it's super whimsical. It's using all like the flutes and the strings, and like in and of itself is kind of fun, because when she trips, like when she gets stuck on the yard, uh, the music kind of pitters out too, kind of funnily. But they use it to like some interesting effect as for example, when Bones is like going up to the house and he's being, just Bones, and he sees
Yeah.
the and he sees the kite. When he walks up to it, it starts playing like a distorted like in the background, a bit of a distorted version of Eliza's song, kind of like showing like the childhood whimsy.
Oh,
I know, I didn't know
that's
that
really cool.
And then they bring it back at the very end when she gets her tricycle, and I think it's kind of used in like some interesting ways, since it is like there's a lot of like childhood and like kid stuff in the thing, and they want to keep it a little whimsical so they can play with it a lot, and they can still make it creepy when, especially like I said, with Bones getting eaten, like as he goes up to the house with his kite.
Yeah, and out of, I think, anything that I've analyzed and looked into the most, the soundtrack is like my least well-known thing, but it's such an important part of the movie, especially when it comes to like basically any horror movie or even animation in general. The music is always super, super important. Like, you don't have a Disney Pixar movie without the soundtrack. It's always like right there up front.
Oh, of course, because like part of your viewing experience is of course what you're viewing and what you're hearing, but also like how music like works in movies is it's really important for either like setting a theme or implicitly like making ideas or associations between characters, and like how you're supposed to feel, because music can just like has those visceral responses in people.
Oh yeah, it really
So
pulls the
but
heartstrings sometimes.
there's a whole world of movie soundtrack analysts like analyzing in movie through their soundtracks and everything in movies. It's crazy.
Yeah, and like most of the time, only like very specific soundtracks I can remember like the original pieces for, which is pretty few and far between. But I think it's done especially well for this, and it like in certain spots in the movie, like when the cops are getting attacked or the chase at the end, like the music's like blaring, but it's really, really good at setting exactly how the mood is supposed to be.
Oh yeah, it's very important. Of course, you're gonna have like standout songs in like other movies and stuff that are either like the main theme or something like that. But really, you need to give a lot of credit to like all like the background stuff because it's making you think of like feel a certain way in a scene without you really even knowing it. Like it'll be like a scary scene because not even because or like suspenseful. Like if someone's like walking up, like if someone's like walking up to something spooky, like it's not suspenseful just because they're walking up, but because like you're feeling suspense from the soundtrack, and it's just adding to it. I think soundtracks in movies are so important.
Yeah, and I feel like they're criminally underrated a lot of the time too.
Yes,
Because watching a movie on mute does not get anywhere close to when you actually have the sound on.
I 100% agree.
Yeah. So, was there any interesting use of instruments within the soundtrack? Because I know a lot of horror movies tend to focus towards strings, so you can like get some eerie noises and whatnot. But I noticed a lot of the like horn section used this time around.
Yeah, so they're actually I made a lot of notes on specific instruments that were used, especially like for example in a lot of the whimsical music, they actually use a lot of bassoon,
Oh,
which is
okay.
which personally I love because I play bassoon, but
Mhm.
uh, it makes a very interesting use because it has such a distinct sound. But they also, while they do use a lot of strings in the soundtrack, there's also a lot of piano and music box kind of sound, which which is mostly used whenever they're talking about the wife or the house, and in certain melodies. Um, they use some fun, spooky xylophones
Yeah.
at some point. There's a theremin at one point, which is like a classic, like spooky sounding instrument, but it's
Yeah.
kind of cheesy, so a lot of people don't use it. They like using it for more sci-fi, like cheesy sci-fi.
Yeah, because that's the one that's like the ooh kind of thing,
Yeah,
right?
the one that yeah makes the oohs with your hands.
Yeah, because yeah, you put your hand in between the thing. I'm not entirely sure how it works, but I do know
Uh,
that one.
yeah, it's wild. Uh, but honestly, there is a lot of like horns used, especially what I found most interesting. This might go into like a bit of another topic, but as much as it's like a spooky horror movie, it's like a monster. It's like a big monster movie as well.
Yeah.
So it borrows a lot of tropes and a lot of like sound from like big triumphant monster movies. I had like a whole part like during like the final battle where Chowder's in the construction equipment and he's like demolishing the thing. It uses a lot of horns and it almost sounds like a superhero movie,
Oh yeah,
like
because
that kind of
yeah, that's the one part in the movie where Chowder's actually doing something good for once.
yes. uh, yes. So they do make use of a lot of different instruments depending on the theme. When it wants to be spooky, it sticks to more piano and some strings. When it wants to be more whimsical, it has flutes and it has bassoon, it has a lot more woodwinds, and when it wants to be more exciting or like well, not suspenseful but more uh, intense, they bring in a lot of brass, like a lot of tuba and some trumpet, French horn, all that fun stuff.
And yeah, I would assume a lot of those instruments and stuff would be pretty commonplace for those like specific scenarios. Like there wasn't some weird use of trumpet during like a really whimsical thing that's kind of out of place. It all seemed to work out pretty okay.
Yeah, you can tell that they know like what the composers and the people that played, they know like what the sounds they knew like the sound that they were trying to achieve for each scene, so they used the appropriate instruments.
Hmm. And then, oh, does this uh, specific producer style? I'm not sure if you listen to any of their other stuff. I'm not super familiar with it, but for this movie, does it remind you of potentially any other composers that might have a similar sort of style? I guess it's sort of hard to say, especially because this in this movie there's a bunch of different types of music that's going on. but I'm not sure if composers stick to
Yeah.
a certain type or not.
It really depends because I know this composer has done a couple other soundtracks for other horror movies. I know Krampus and for Trick or Treat,
Mhm.
and I haven't listened to those soundtracks, but it seems like he's pretty comfortable in the kind of horror-esque kind of sound. But of course, and when you think about kind of like spooky ooky composers, a lot of the time you'll think immediately of like Danny Elfman or other or composers of other like kind of children's monster or horror movies. But I don't think I don't think is necessarily like the comparison is necessarily very strong, seeing as people like Danny Elfman have done numerous types of soundtrack work and have done like I don't even know how many different movies of different styles.
Yeah, he's all
But
over the place.
yeah, but I know this, and I don't think a composer is necessarily bound to like a specific style. It's more the way our ears kind of like pick up on sound. Like of course, the three soundtracks that this composer had done, which I really should have had his name written down, but I feel
Oh man, I had it.
I
I'll pull it up. Don't worry, I've got it somewhere.
okay,
So
awesome.
you keep going.
I know he as much as he's in like horror sounds, like especially like in this movie, like there's a bunch of different like kind of sounds going on. Like there's the like suspenseful, there's like the horror with like all the tritones and minor seconds going on, but then there's like the whimsy and like the kind of superhero-esque themes. So I don't think they're necessarily like stuck to like composers are stuck in like one type of sound. Of course there's going to be preferences between people that are arranging and people that are composing things, but there's a lot you can do with like just like once you know how to like write a melody and how to back a soundtrack and how to instrument your thing, there's a lot of different like sounds and ideas you can get out of it, even though
Yeah.
he's done only horror soundtracks. But I don't think that he's like just like a one trick pony in that
Yeah.
sense.
His name is Douglas Pipes. I had it
Yes.
written earlier. I had it off. I knew it, but it's for whatever reason it escaped me in this moment. But I think he does nail the horror type music genre as it is, because I feel like it's its own genre on its own. But he does a
Oh
really good
yeah.
job with it. Like the entire soundtrack, there wasn't any songs that felt weirdly out of place,
Yes.
and a lot of the stuff sounded like familiar, but it's never anything that I've really heard before. But I did get sort of Danny Elfman vibes, especially from like the first beginning bits of the movie, which isn't a bad thing.
No.
Especially because they played for whatever reason, used the Beetlejuice theme in one of the trailers on YouTube.
Yeah, that's beyond me. I don't know if I.
Yeah,
What?
I don't know. Let's see. So we can take a quick little break from discussing the music, and I've got a couple questions to ask you about the movie, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I gotta ask who your favorite character or characters are and why. Gotta try and keep a tally of who everyone's said so far.
Honestly, probably my favorite character is Nevercracker, just because I really love the kind of tragedy element between him and his wife. Of course, he's like the crotchety old like man, and he's supposed to be the villain, but I think really he really comes into being at the end. You really see like the tragedy and how much he really loves his wife despite her being a house.
Hmm. Yeah, and Liam mentioned that Nevercracker's a really great character because he's thrown in as a red herring really early in as the movie goes, because you'd think that he was gonna be the main bad guy, like as it is, and then they kick him out like immediately, but then they bring him back later on.
Yes, and he's like almost completely changed. You finally see once you have like the information, you finally get it
Yeah.
along with like DJ and everyone.
Yeah, so they don't just play him off as like the crotchety old man across the street like you might suspect him to be. So they did a really good job with that. And because you said Nevercracker, he's finally in the lead for everyone's favorite character so far.
Oh, awesome.
He finally Bones is not the majority. For people like Bones apparently.
Why do people like Bones?
Yeah, we've got I think 2 for Bones, 3 for Nevercracker, and 1 for DJ's dad.
And 18 for Chowder.
No one has really said Chowder. No, like pretty much any of the main characters, no one's really said, which is surprising because they are interesting.
Yeah, I'd say my second favorite character is definitely DJ though.
Okay. And then so we watched this last night. Was that the first time you've seen the movie, or had you seen it like years ago as a kid?
Oh, I've seen it many times years ago, but I haven't
Okay.
seen it in like a good like year or something.
Okay. So going back to potentially the first time you watched it, did you have any specific memories of the movie? Anything that stuck out?
I definitely remember it being longer, but that's probably just my kid brain going. But I definitely do like the thing that always stuck out about the movie was like the whole like idea of the wife becoming the house, like her like soul becoming like infused with the house and her being stuck down there. That was always the thing that I remember about the movie because I think it was just so tragic almost.
Yeah, I mean, you don't really expect there to be, a cement encased body down in the basement, so I'm pretty sure that definitely catches a lot of people by surprise.
Yeah, and you expect it to just be like a whole like monstrous like thing or like some like evil spirit or whatever, but I feel once you get the backstory and seeing him like save Constance from the circus and everything, uh, I think it's really like something like different that you can latch onto. I also remember the vacuum cleaner, the
Vacuum
the-
cleaner dummy?
Yeah,
No one said that's their favorite character so far, and I'm sad. He's my favorite
Yeah.
character. I love
We- we-
Vacuum
we-
Cleaner Dummy.
we need justice for vacuum cleaner
Yep.
dummy.
He's listed as an ally for pretty much every single character in the movie on the wiki, so he's pretty important.
I'm a little surprised that there's a whole Monster House wiki.
It's not great. There's not a whole lot of info, but like there's enough. And then it's also going back to Constance and stuff. For her being pretty much the main antagonist of the movie, it's nice that she herself has like redeeming like backstory quality and stuff to her, where she's not just inherently evil all the way through just because she can be. It's like understandable,
Yes,
which
I agree.
they did a really good job of explaining that, and it is like pretty tragic. You can be like, I can totally understand why she's so mad all the time and stuff, and it sucks that it has to be that way.
Well, yeah, especially if you put into context, for being like in the 1940s and being in the circus and being a woman,
Yeah.
like that's so like the amount of resentment like you'd imagine.
And then, so do you, compared to potentially watching it as a kid, do you think it holds up, or do you think it got a little bit better, like having watched it recently?
I think it would be a little bit better because I think when I was a kid, I was always like into like ooh the big monster stuff, and I didn't really care about the anime. Like I thought the animation was fine because I was a kid.
Mhm.
I don't think the animation holds up as strongly as I remember, but I think the more subtler story elements kind of brings it back up to either around like the same level or like a bit higher than I remember because I
Okay.
think I appreciate like I understand that it was like a 2006 movie, fully CGI, not like a huge budget compared to like other like massive animation movies, right?
Yeah.
So I understand and like just kind of give it the benefit of the doubt on that, and I do appreciate like the more subtler stuff for kind of what the story is. So I'm glad they kind of put some like nice themes and like interesting themes I can watch back and like, huh, that really is sad, or that
Yeah.
really is interesting.
Yeah, they do a really good job of like sort of going through the whole tragedy and trauma type things, which is surprising to get from like a kids movie, but I think they
Yes.
do a really nice job with that. And if so, yeah, the movie being roughly like an hour and a half, was there anything in particular you wish they expanded upon a little bit more, or do you think there was any scenes that they could have just done without entirely?
I think they could have. I mean, this is probably just coming from me when I used to play the old GameCube video game, but I wish they spent more time like exploring the house because really you only see its mouth and like the basement, and
Hmm.
then they're out of there. And
Yeah,
I
that is
thought
true.
like there was a lot of like missed potential, like going up the stairs or like seeing like the idea with like the windows like being the spotlights and all that stuff. I think that was like really cool.
Yeah.
But they're really only in like the main room and then they fall into the basement, and
Yeah.
that's it.
They definitely, in the concept art, they did have a lot more concept for other stuff, like on the other floors and stuff. But I would imagine, due to like their budget and thinking about what's really the most important to keep in like a time frame, they cut some of the stuff. But I know there's like some like stuff that related and they put into the GameCube version afterwards. But I can definitely agree. I was wishing that they showed around the house like a little bit more at the very least.
Yeah, I don't know if it would have added anything, but I think it would have fleshed out like the fact that it is like a monster house,
Yeah.
right?
Man, that
Uh,
makes me wish or makes me want to play the video games again. Because I would imagine they hold up pretty okay.
yeah, I remember them. I remember them being pretty fun when I used to rent them from Blockbuster.
Yeah, oh, those were the days. Let's see. So we're roughly at like the 27-minute mark here, surprisingly already.
Wow.
So we'll probably get to the last couple things. Was there anything? If we aren't able to cover anything, might be able to save it for another episode potentially. But was there any other big noteworthy things that you had written down?
Um, honestly, not a lot. Like I took like I noted like some like they tend to like stick around like the same kind of intervals and like themes, and that kind of makes the movie like cohesive. But there's some like interesting things where like even with a lot of the actiony like scenes, they s- the music starts kind of slow and like not like just like ramming into it. They usually start with like like some suspended strings or something like that. So I was kind of interested. You'd think like once they get into like the house chasing, or like when they're fighting like the house, or like there's something like exciting or like big happening on screen, that they just like go right into it. But it's kind of reserved in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah,
I wasn't expecting that.
yeah, because when I'm thinking like action wise, it's crazy, super fast, just all the way through, and they just start like blaring stuff at you. And
Yes, it gets to that point, but like when I was noting when like music started, I'm like, this is kind of interesting because it's like it's not blaring right away, and then it gets into the blaring.
yeah, and then I believe when the house dies for the first time, it like gets to a quiet and then builds its way back up all over again. I
Yes,
believe. I'm going off of memory for that. I think.
yes, you're right because it'll
Perfect.
drop down, and then uh it picks back up.
Yeah. Man, now I need to. I think I should also go through individually each of the songs and listen to them because they like only a couple songs distinctly stand out to me, but I think that means the other songs blended so well with what was going on that it's not that they're inherently like not memorable, but it just works really well.
Yeah, and of course, like in soundtrack music, it's not always supposed to be like you're supposed to remember every single song. It's supposed to be setting a mood.
Yeah.
So in that sense, like it's a victory.
Yeah, you don't have to not every single like piece of like a 25 song album has to be the number one song of the album.
Yeah. And then other than that, like I think it was just pretty commendable, like how well the music works with like what's happening on screen, like in terms of like what the characters are doing, because the music lines up a lot. So I'd wonder if they like wrote the music first, or and then like made the animation to it, or if they were like working in like tandem.
Yeah, that's I can't remember which came first. I think that they might have done the concept art first and then put music to the concept art and then done the animations afterwards.
That
So
would
then
make
they
sense.
they could have the storyboard artists work like really one to one with the person working on the music, so they could. And I think you can tell that that might have been the way they do it because it does work really well with everything going on.
Yeah, it's almost like sound effects rather than a soundtrack.
Yeah, and even the sound effects were done in a really really good way, but that's a entirely different topic.
Oh yeah.
So we are pretty much at the end here, and I think it's important that you give this movie a final rating. It
What
can
am I
be on
rating it out of?
any scale that you want to rate it out of.
Oh, I think I'm just gonna stick to the tried and true 10-point scale.
All
I
right.
give it probably like a 7 out of 10.
7 out of 10? Not bad. I
Yeah,
mean, it's not quite as
definitely.
good as Imagine Party Babies, but it counts.
But is anything ever as good as Imagine Party Babies?
That's true, very few things are.
Yes.
So I guess that's yeah, we are at the end of things here. So thank you so much for coming on and taking all those notes about all the songs. I really wouldn't have expected anyone to actually do it. So I'm really glad that you did because it was really fun to like this is something that I know a lot about music, but I don't know a lot about music theory. And that's a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, when in Rome, I suppose you just kind of notice these things after listening enough to it.
Yeah, that's true. So, is there any final remarks you want to leave us off with?
Uh, nope. I can't
right.
think of anything.
That's all good. Don't worry about it. So, I guess thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.